Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission, and this mission is really turning into primarily being the Zettelkasten right now, at least in terms of my YouTube videos. Well, I am at the spot where I can share with you another episode in our Adler series on how to read a book. I've been working with how to read a book, analytical reading, and we finished all of the rules of analytical reading. And now it became time for me to actually take those rules and turn it into an experience. And that experience is going through Start With Why by Simon Sinek and following Adler's rules to find the propositions and find the arguments that supported the propositions. Well, I learned something rather interesting, and I will show it to you in the cards. This one isn't going to be a super long one. It was more of an insight and also showing you how I'm organizing my cards for analytical reading. And then we'll come back here as I talk about where we're going next with this series. So let's take a look over at the cards as we so often do. See you in the down-facing camera. From all the work that we've done with the book, Simon Sinek, Start With Why, I have created quite a number of bib cards, far more than I would normally create, many of which were because I was doing superficial reading onto bib cards so I could share that experience with you. Well, now I want to share a little bit, an example of what I'm running into when I do the deep reading. What I want to share with you in this card is how I'm formatting my bib cards to do analytical reading where I'm identifying propositions and arguments. The decision I've decided to make is to number my propositions with a P dot and then the page number that I found the proposition on and carry those over to the front side of my bib card. On the back side of the bib card, I'll identify the proposition and include the arguments. My reason being that the arguments are generally factual information that supports the proposition, and the proposition itself is the idea that's potentially worthy of being carried over to a main card. I want to show you here two different kinds of supporting information for propositions that I found. This seems to cover pretty much everything I've found so far in Simon Sinek's book. He primarily states his propositions and then provides multiple examples. And almost all of his proof is either of the form, this example, this example, this example, as compared to these counter examples, and with some statements that are pretty much statements that amount to it stands to reason that, or you can well imagine that, to fill in the extra spaces. So what I'm not finding rigorous proofs like you would in something scientific. It's not surprising because this is a business book, not a scientific book. But what it is meaning for me trying to illustrate Adler's mechanism for analytic reading is that when it comes right down to it, there isn't a whole lot of proof. However, it still follows the same form. And so I'm picking these items out as though stating a few examples constituted proof. In my world, it doesn't, but maybe that's the norm in the business community, is that a few examples constitutes proof. Well, then with the description of the golden circle, the format was flipped, and the arguments came first, and then I stated the proposition based on what I heard the argument stating. And the one that moved me the most was when he gave an example of a non-compelling sales pitch compared to a nearly identical sales pitch that's far more compelling that starts with why. And the non-compelling one was, we make great computers. They're beautifully designed and simple to use. Do you want to buy one? That's starting with what? Now, he used an example of starting with why. Everything we do challenges the status quo. For example, this informs the way we make our products. They're beautifully designed and simple to use. And we happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? So this includes a why statement that the potential buyer might well identify with. And then here's an example, this wonderful product. You want to buy the product? Well, you already wanted to buy into the why statement, and you were in the market for the product. Why not? They're beautifully designed and simple to use. So why wouldn't you buy the one that also aligns with your values? And I think that is part of why I think that's a lot of the meat on the bones of this book. But of far more importance to me from the generality of how do we apply Adler's method is, for me, is the concept of identifying the propositions in the normal way while doing a normal bib card, but be distinct about what is the proposition and what are the arguments. And be aware that sometimes the proposition will come forth first and the arguments to support it second, and sometimes the arguments will come first and then therefore the proposition will come second, as saying, and see, now we prove this. Then for my purposes, I'm going to also carry the propositions themselves over to the front of the bib card because these are the candidates for main cards. Okay, I am not finished with this book. If you're going to do it, you have to really do it, and it's not the only thing I'm doing, so it's taking me a little while. So I will probably be somewhat intermittent with these Adler messages, and then I'll try to bring them all together in a group later when they're all complete. But where I'm going from this, and the reason why I want to complete this book and actually gather all of the propositions, is that the next step beyond analytical reading is syntopical reading. And in syntopical reading, the way Adler describes it, you're reading multiple books on the same topic at the same time. But my point is, with the Zettelkasten, because you are gathering the ideas in a way that they stand ready to interact with other ideas, you don't have to necessarily read them all at the same time. You can read them sequentially, or you can read a couple at a time, and this one's sequentially, and that one another time, and come up with another one years later and still syntopically read it into your Zettelkasten. So for that reason, I've accumulated some additional books that are on the same topic, and I wanted to share with you the ones that I'm planning to read syntopically with the one that I'm reading as my foundational book. The Transformational Leader by Matt Mayberry. Okay, this is part of what Simon Sinek talks about, is that good leaders lead to transformations in a company. So here's another author talking about how to build transformational leadership. Matt Tenney, Inspire Greatness. Again, this comes off from a main tenet that Simon Sinek talks about. He talks about you can either manipulate your audience or you can inspire them. And this one is the inspiration side, which Simon Sinek says is the only one that leads to lasting success. And the third book is another one from Simon Sinek, Find Your Why. So this book seems to me to be a natural offshoot to start with why. You better know what your why is. Well, how are you going to find your why? Says right in the title that he's going to help you find it. So now my plan is to read these books syntopically into my Zettelkasten and show how the main cards that come out of the Simon Sinek book will interact with the main cards that come out of all these other books and create a conversation. Here's why this term is so enormously valuable. When you look at something from one perspective, you get a view of the object. If you're looking at the same object from a slightly different perspective, you get a slightly different view. That's what happens with your eyes. Your eyes actually have slightly different views of the same object that you're looking at. The result is 3D. And the same thing can happen, the equivalent of 3D, with your reading. When you take the same goals and you take two different authors' takes on those goals, you can get a more dimensional a more well-rounded, a more nuanced picture of the field as a whole. So that's why syntopical reading is so valuable. But what's really going to be exciting about this is seeing the main cards that come out of the various books and how they interact and how the conversations form. Because one of the things that we don't want to do with reading is we don't want to get little silos where you have, oh, here's the cards that I made from Start With Why. Okay, here are the cards that I made from Inspiring Greatness. Okay, here are the cards that I made from the Transformational Leader. Okay, and they all sit separately in the Zettelkasten. That's not a Zettelkasten. That's a bib card in Zettelkasten form. That's a bib card in file card form. And we're not going there. We're going for the real Zettelkasten, which is how thoughts and ideas interact. And you can really see that when you do syntopical reading. So that's why I think it's worth the effort, even though it's going to take some time. That's why I'm going to come back with these episodes when I have something to share, and we're just going to really do it. So I'll see you later. Bye-bye.